In this video, we'll go over some of the basic features of the MyMathLab assignments for the course Math 0 to 100, which has been integrated with eLearn. Now, the first thing is, when you go into each one of these sections, there will be a link for the MyLab Math Pearson eText. So if you click on it, now let's see, we're doing section 5.1 in this case. The one thing to note is, unfortunately, it doesn't take you right to that specific section. It'll always just take you to the very first page of the textbooks, or the first page of chapter 1. To go to the specific section, if you click on this table of contents link, and then go down to, let's say, like we're supposed to be doing for section, or chapter 5, section 5.1, and then it'll open that specific section. So you could close the table of contents. And one thing to note, there are these links here, which are links for additional videos for the course. So you could have that for each one of these main topics. So you see that they say that there will be ones for those 4 main topics. So, and then to go to the next page, you would just like click this arrow button at the bottom right, and like set. So that'll be how you navigate between the page. So there's the ones on the left and the right. And if you notice, there are again these additional links in here. So like this one is for another video, here's for an animation, and here's for an additional, like you try it, so where you do a practice problem. So that's one nice thing about the ebook version of the textbook, is that you have these additional features which you wouldn't have with a normal hard copy of the textbook. Now going back, so that's how you could look at the textbook. Now, the MyMathLab assignments for each section are located in these MyMathLab assignments subfolders. Now, one thing to note, like if we go to the section 5.2, if you notice, at first it'll only have one assignment, the very first one. Remember, you got to do each one of the previous assignments for the links to become available for the each one of the assignments. So like going to this one, that this lesson B wouldn't show up until you did the lesson A, the homework assignment wouldn't have shown up until you done the lesson B, and the quiz one won't show up until you do the homework. So that's why you won't see all the links at first, but again, it's to make sure that you do them in order. So for the lesson assignments, it's what you would do like if you're in a class where the assignment would, your instructor would do a presentation and maybe an example. So that's what these videos are here on the left. And then once you watch those videos, then this link for the questions that you'll do will become available. Again, you got to watch the video first before the questions will become available. And then once you do each one of those lesson assignments, then the homework assignment will become available. And let's look into like the homework assignment one. So if you see, here's this homework assignment, and a couple of things to note. To be able to do the quiz, you got to score at least an 80% on the homework assignment before you could even do the quiz. And another thing is that for the homework assignments, you can do them past their due dates as long as it's before the day of the final exam, but there will be a 20% penalty deducted from questions completed after the due date. So you'll still be able to do the homework if you don't get it done by the homework or by the due date. But again, we highly recommend you do them by the due date, because one thing to note, the quizzes, there are no extensions on the quizzes, and you cannot do those after the due dates. So, and to be able to do the quizzes, you got to score at least 80% on the homework. So again, it's best to do everything on time. But just in case, that you still can do your homework assignments after the due date, just with this 20% penalty. Now let's do an example. If you're doing a homework problem, like so it show up, and then it gives you the problem, and then for you to enter your answer, you just click here, and this little palette will show up. So like it'll have additional things you may use, like let's say the superscript, fractions, square roots, and so on. And you'll get used to that the more problems you do. And then there's also these help features like this is help me solve this or view an example. So if you click on these, this will show you examples of doing this type of problem. There's also, if you just get more help drop down window, if you open this, click on this, there'll be a video, like another video example of doing this type of problem. This textbook will send you to it'll open up the textbook in another window where it'll go to the specific section you're working on. Now, if you still have problems after all these other help features, you could click on this Ask My Instructor, and what that'll allow you to do is to send an email which will have a link to the specific problem you're working on. And so it'll open up a window, it'll give you a place where you could type a message to your instructor and then to send. And then, like I said, the email message that your instructor will get will also include a link to the specific problem, because each student's questions are different because they're algorithmically generated, so the instructor can see exactly what you're working on, and you don't have to try to explain it or take screenshots or anything. They'll be able to see the problem that you're working on. So that's the way to ask questions to your instructor on specific homework problems on MyMathLab. And then one thing, once you do the problem, you click here, check answer. I think you may be given, for some of them, like up to 3 attempts to enter a correct answer. And then if you still get it wrong, then a similar exercise button will show up. And then you click on that and it'll give you one a little different, but mostly just a change in numbers. And then you could keep working on it until you get it correct, so that you could keep working on these problems until you could get 100% on the homework assignment. Because although you need to only score at least an 80%, we always recommend you do strive to get 100% on the homework. And then once you've scored at least at 80% on the homework, then you can do your quiz. When you do your quizzes, one thing to note, there won't be any of the help features because they're quizzes, and they also are timed. I believe that they may be 30 minutes or so. Well, let's see. Let's click on a quiz. Let's see. So you have 3 attempts, and you do have 30 minutes for the quiz. So these ones won't be proctored using the lockdown browser, but the exams will be. But so again, you'll have 3 attempts for each quiz, and again, there's a due date. Remember, there are no extensions on the quizzes except by emergency situations, based on the discretion of your instructor. So make sure to get them done on time. And as I've mentioned before in a previous video, that let's say if you don't get 100% on your first attempt for the quiz, I would highly recommend you don't just right away try to do another attempt. You should review, see what you got wrong on the quiz, and then if you still can't figure it out, maybe go back to the homework and see problems that are similar to it, because for every single quiz question there are similar ones on the homework. And then you could even use the help features on the homework to really make sure you know to do it before you do your second attempt. But that also means not waiting until the last minute to do your quizzes, because that could take a little bit of time. Now, the other thing is when you do your exams. So let's see, for the first exam, what you do is go to the exam 1 folder. Now again, there's the link for the textbook so you could review. There's this practice test link. This will allow you to take a practice test, which is totally optional. It does not affect your grade. But what it will allow you to do is download the lockdown browser and get used to the online proctor system in a stress-free environment. So it'll make sure that you can make sure everything works and you're not waiting until the last minute before you take the actual exam, because you would hate to have it when you say, okay, I'm ready to take the exam, but then when you try to do the stuff with the lockdown browser, you say, oh wait, why isn't this opening? So it's better to try to get this done early. That's why I highly recommend students that this is available on the very first day of the class, so I would try to do this very early, like in the first week, and just make sure everything's working, so that way you have time if there's any technical issues that you need to solve beforehand. There's the exam review assignment. Those are required for you to do. Those are just like the MyMathLab homework assignments, um, but it's like ones to help you review for the exam. So it's covering the entire chapter. There's also these optional review sheets. And then this is the link to take your exam. So it'll be just like doing it for the quizzes, except you'll see when we click on it, well, for this one, it's not available yet, but when it does become available, not only will you start taking the quiz, but it'll turn on the lockdown browser, which will not allow you to use anything else on your computer except for the quiz program. So you'll take your exam, and one thing, when you take your exam, don't forget, before you even start, have your picture ID ready for identification verification. Because at the beginning of the exam, or before the exam actually starts, it'll tell you to show your picture ID clearly up to your webcam. And one other thing, you will need a webcam when you're taking the exam. So you'll show your picture ID up to your webcam. Make sure it's clear and up close. Don't show it too far away, because your instructor needs to verify your name. If you're using anything like your driver's license, you can cover the personal information, and just make sure your picture's visible and your name is clearly visible as well. And then once you've done that, and you also do this environment check, which just tells you to kind of scan your room with the camera, so verifying you don't have anything you're not allowed, because you're not allowed to use your book. All you're allowed to have is your ID, a scientific calculator, something to write with, and then blank paper to write down your work for the exam. And then once you start taking the exam, when you're doing that, again, it's highly recommended, or required actually, for you to show your work for the questions, and make sure your work is neatly written and it's numbered. So you do, okay, here's number 1, and then show your work for number 1, and then 2, and so on. It's just like if you were to turn in your work for your exam on the test. That way, when you complete the exam, what you'll do is you'll take a picture of your work with your phone, and maybe using a program like Genius Scan, which is one you could download for free on iPhones or Android phones, and I believe Google phones, all those types of phones can use it. And again, it's Genius Scan. It's one word, and it's free. What they'll allow you to do is, when you take your pictures with that app, it'll save it as a single PDF file, and then what you'll do is you'll download that file into this Dropbox immediately after completing the exam. Make sure you do this, because if you do it too long after your exam, your instructor may not count it, because it's kind of like saying, okay, you left for a while and who knows what you did, and then you turn your work to your instructor later. Your instructor may say, hey, okay, I'm not accepting that because I don't know what you did in the meanwhile. So make sure you do that immediately afterwards. And yeah, you'll do that for each one of your exams. So for exam 1, and then for, wrong folder, exam 2, same thing. And then for the final exam, again, you do the same thing for all of those. Now, good luck.